Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, October 1994.
In the frozen heart of Saskatchewan's prairies, where vast wheat fields stretch endlessly beneath enormous skies, a predator stalked the most vulnerable. Between 1981 and 1992, John Martin Crawford murdered at least 4 Indigenous women in Saskatoon, though investigators believe the true number may be higher. His crimes exposed not only the darkness of one man's depravity, but also the systemic failures that allowed Indigenous women to disappear with little public attention or urgency. This is the story of how a serial killer operated in plain sight and how justice, delayed but inevitable, finally caught up with him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Saskatoon's Court of Queen's bench as John Martin Crawford shuffled into the prisoner's box, his wrists bound in handcuffs. At 42 years old, he was unremarkable in appearance. Average height, thinning brown hair, a face that could belong to anyone. But the families packed into the gallery knew better. They saw the man who had stolen their daughters, their sisters, their mothers. Crown Prosecutor Al Johnston rose to his feet, his voice steady as he addressed Justice Ted Malone. Your Honor, the Crown will prove that the accused is responsible for the deaths of 3 women, Eva Taysup, Shelley Napope, and Kalinda Waterhen. These were calculated, brutal murders of vulnerable women whom the accused targeted, exploited, and ultimately destroyed. Crawford stared straight ahead, emotionless. In the gallery, family members wept quietly. This moment had been years in the making, built on the determination of investigators who refused to let these women be forgotten, and on the courage of communities demanding justice. Crawford's path to murder began long before his victims knew his name. Born in 1954, he grew up in Saskatoon's working-class neighborhoods. His childhood was marked by instability and violence, patterns that would later define his own actions. By his early 20s, Crawford had already accumulated a criminal record for assault and property crimes. In 1981, he committed his first known murder. Mary Jane Sirloin, a 29-year-old Cree woman, was found dead in a Saskatoon hotel room. She had been brutally beaten and strangled. Crawford was questioned but never charged. Evidence was insufficient, and the investigation languished. It was a failure that would prove fatal for others. Throughout the 1980s, Crawford moved through Saskatoon's underbelly, frequenting bars and areas where Indigenous women, many struggling with poverty and addiction, were vulnerable. He developed a pattern, befriending women, offering money or alcohol, then luring them to isolated locations. In 1992, the disappearances accelerated. Eva Taysup, 36, was last seen in downtown Saskatoon in June. A mother and member of the Coat First Nation, she had struggled with alcoholism but was beloved by her family. Her body was discovered months later in a field outside the city, partially decomposed. Just weeks after Ava vanished, Shelley Napope, 16, disappeared. The teenager from the Musqueam First Nation had run away from home, drawn to the city's dangerous streets. Her remains were found near Eva's in September, hidden in tall grass where Crawford had dumped her like refuse. Kalinda Waterhen, 22, was the 3rd victim found. A young mother from the Onion Lake First Nation, she disappeared in August 1992. Her body was discovered near the others, creating a grim pattern investigators could no longer ignore. Saskatoon police formed a special task force. Officers interviewed street workers, reviewed missing persons reports, and began connecting dots that had been visible all along. Multiple women reported encounters with a man matching Crawford's description, someone who seemed friendly at first but whose demeanor would shift, becoming aggressive and threatening. The breakthrough came when police linked Crawford through witness statements and physical evidence to all three 1992 victims. He had been seen with each woman shortly before they vanished. Soil samples from his vehicle matched the dump sites. Fibers from his home matched clothing on the victims. In January 1993, police arrested Crawford. In his interrogation, he remained defiant, offering nothing. But the evidence spoke for him. At trial, the prosecution methodically built their case. Forensic experts testified about the evidence. Family members described their loved ones, not as statistics or stereotypes, but as whole people with dreams and struggles, mothers and daughters who deserve to be remembered. On December 19th, 1996, Justice Malone delivered the verdict, guilty on all three counts of first-degree murder. Crawford was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. But questions remained. Investigators believed Crawford killed Mary Jane Sirloin in 1981 and potentially others whose bodies were never found. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Inquiry would later cite his case as emblematic of systemic failures, how Indigenous women's disappearances received inadequate attention and resources. John Martin Crawford remains imprisoned, his name a dark chapter in Saskatchewan's history. His victims' families continue to advocate for change, ensuring that Ava, Shelley, Kalinda, and Mary Jane are remembered not as Crawford's victims, but as women whose lives mattered. Thank you for watching. Click the like button and follow for more true crime stories.